Daenerys Targaryen of Game of Thrones is a character loved by some, but her downfall left many puzzled and even angered. Some felt that her decision to destroy an entire city after its surrender was not aligned with who she was as a person, while others claim that the signs were always there. Here, using my training and work as a psychologist in diagnostic assessment, I will outline her psychological profile. I will use examples from throughout the series and apply psychological tools to measure her personality traits, traumatic experiences, and environmental factors. This analysis will be highly detailed. I plan to supplement this video with an article on Substack, which will be linked in the description should you desire more information in a written format. It will be organized in 3 sections: an overview of her development, how she grows and changes, an assessment of her personality traits, and diagnosis. Before I begin, the common phrasing used to question her downfall is that she experienced madness. Madness is not a clinical term. In the dictionary, it is defined as a state of severe mental illness, behavior, or thinking that is very foolish or dangerous, ecstasy, enthusiasm, intense anger, or rage. Trauma and early adverse experiences. We first meet Daenerys in Pentos, under the control of her brother. He treats her like an object and alludes to a tendency to abuse her.
You don't want to wake the dragon, do you?
No.
As the moment approaches of her forced marriage to a man she's never met, we witness our first symptom of trauma, dissociation. Dissociation is when an individual feels detached from their body or thoughts, which we first see as she stares blankly into space as she enters a hot bath. This is a process that is unconsciously developed by a person experiencing trauma to allow them to cope with unpleasant experiences. Dany stands up to her brother and states that she doesn't want the marriage.
I don't want to be his queen.
But her brother demonstrates his complete lack of concern for her well-being.
I would let his whole tribe you. All 40,000 men and their horses too, if that's what it took.
Her only family member in the world cares nothing about her. After her marriage to Khal Drogo, we again see Dany dissociate before she is forced to have sex. Ultimately, she adapts to her marriage and gains skills to please him. This allows her to gain agency in her position. However, her brother continues to assert his power over her, as we see her become passive as she always has. The difference now is that she is defended by her people. She also realizes that Ser Jorah is loyal to her, giving her a sense of belonging and trust that she never had before. When her brother's abuse continues, she has now gained the confidence to defend herself and set an appropriate limit on his behavior by recognizing his own importance within the Dothraki.
I am a Khaleesi of the Dothraki. I am the wife of the great Khal, and I carry his son inside me. The next time you raise a hand to me will be the last time you have hands.
Her brother's abuse now escalates as he realizes he is losing his power. This time, she has both Jorah and Drogo to defend her. When his death approaches, she refuses to look away. This presents her with a sense of closure to her history of being abused. She states,
"Fire cannot kill a dragon,"
which is one of the first major moments that will later feed to her strong self-image. Finding her purpose. As Dany is now free from abuse, she asserts her power to stop the rape and murder of slaves, even when this is an unpopular decision amongst her people. Ultimately, Drogo's death approaches related to some of her decisions. As she voices her despair, she maintains a strong sense of self. After this tragedy, she becomes ruthless in her purpose. She vows
That those who would harm you will die screaming,
and proceeds to burn the witch alive while entering the pyre herself. This is the first moment we see her ruthlessness. Burning the witch is understandable as she killed her husband, but her vow merits some attention. She emerges from the flames with her dragons, which reinforces that she is special, greatly increasing her sense of self-importance, as it probably would for anyone who emerges with dragons for the first time. At this point, we have seen the first signs, the emergence of her grandiosity. As she wanders through the desert, she comes to Karth, who does not initially allow her to enter. Her response is to threaten their destruction, a sign of her capability of rage.
We will lay waste to armies and burn cities to the ground. Turn us away, and we will burn you first.
During her time in Karth, she becomes more confident and regularly voices her desire for conquest, as well as her self-importance, which at times borders on perspectives that appear to be bizarre to others.
I'm no ordinary woman. My dreams come true.
This is increased by Ser Jorah, who feeds this viewpoint.
You would be loved.
Karth is where her trust is violated. Her dragons are stolen as part of a plot for her ally to gain the city, and she again turns to rage.
Where are my dragons?
Ultimately, she is able to escape and punish those who wronged her. An important detail here is that her handmaid also betrayed her trust, albeit less directly. Dany's punishment is particularly brutal, as they will suffer a slow death. She sees this as justified due to their motives, but this is a glimpse into the severity of her actions when she feels she is in the right. When seeking the Unsullied, she is disgusted by their training and demonstrates consistency with her morals, not wanting to own slaves. She also demonstrates compassion for crucified slaves. She is clear to state that she does not want to harm innocents in her future conquests, a clear point in her morals that we should note. When making a deal for the Unsullied, her judgment is questioned. Here we see her voice her anger at those close to her for daring to question her choices.
If you ever question me in front of strangers again, you'll be advising someone else.
She proceeds to order the killing of all masters. From her perspective, this is justified, as they contribute to slavery and therefore act immorally. She again remains consistent with her morals by freeing the Unsullied, inspiring their loyalty. Her purpose continues to an extreme extent. She chooses to take another slave city rather than prepare her invasion of Westeros, even refusing a large payoff, which would have helped her cross over. Staying true to this purpose inspires even greater loyalty and wins over the people. This shows Dany that she can be loved. After witnessing more horrific acts by the Masters, she responds with brutality. She orders the killing of an equal amount of Masters. She speaks of no trial, no system to determine who. She simply categorizes them as guilty. Even when she hears their screams in the distance, she feels no empathy. She feels vindicated. When she encounters resistance and the possibility of sailing for Westeros, she recognizes the importance of demonstrating why her people should follow her, making the decision to remain.
I will not let those I have freed slide back into chains.
She then learns of her crucifixion of a man's father, a cost of her justice.
You crucified him.
She initially defends her actions, but learns the man was innocent. Here, we can see her remorse, and she relents. Despite this development, she proceeds to order the execution of every master. Jorah counsels her that there is good and evil on both sides. He makes a strong point. Dany maintains a strong position, binding it to her purpose of ending slavery, but relents on the pure brutality. Dealing with adversity. Information eventually comes to light that Jorah had spied on her in the past. This is a huge feeling of betrayal, as her oldest friend is now exiled. This is mistrust unlike any she's experienced before. Dany then encounters resistance to her new world in Meereen, but this time it's not the Masters. It is an old slave who lost a life he wanted. She greatly struggles with this concept, but she adapts and allows a compromise.
I will allow you to sign a contract with your former master.
Dany is then confronted with the collateral damage of her dragons, the price of her power. Her reaction to this is one of empathy. Her solution is to lock up the dragons to prevent further harm. Meereen continues to reject her rule. The Sons of the Harpy murder her people. When a Son of the Harpy is captured, her instinct is to execute him. She is receptive to Ser Barristan's counsel for a trial. She is educated about the horrors of her father, how he stamped out dissent. Ser Barristan draws a very important distinction that her father always felt he was giving justice, and she is receptive. So, we continue to see her take the advice of those with a different perspective. When a former slave on her council violates her order, she continues to value her justice and makes a tough decision. This is integrity at the cost of the people's favor. This is the first time she loses the support of the common people. Resistance continues to grow, and she loses Ser Barristan, a friend and important advisor. In response to this loss, she resists Daario's full extermination approach, but still makes a very extreme decision and rounds up leaders of the great families. Her justice is now becoming severe. She executes people without any knowledge of their guilt to inspire fear. After this extreme measure, she compromises and opens the fighting pits to promote goodwill amongst the people and proposes a political marriage. Despite being advised to execute her enemies, at this point she resists. She is pursuing an ideal. When opening the pits, Ser Jorah makes an appearance. Dany's emotional reaction is noticeable. She still feels his betrayal. She is introduced to Tyrion, who references her past success, further feeding her self-image.
This girl without wealth, lands, or armies had somehow acquired all three in a very short span of time, along with 3 dragons.
Dany chooses to exile Ser Jorah. His betrayal has clearly taken a toll on her. Tyrion proceeds to earn her favor by pointing out that she only has the support of the common people and advises her to earn the favor of the nobles. Dany continues to cite her purpose and decides that she wants to break the system and create something better.
I'm going to break the wheel.
As she continues with the fighting pits, her righteousness is called into question about men choosing what to do with their own lives.
Your reasons are true and theirs are false. They don't know their own minds, but you do.
Despite all of her efforts, the uprising against her continues. Ser Jorah and Drogon come to save her in her time of need. From this moment of desperation, she rides Drogon for the first time. Her power emerges from adversity. After she flies out of the conflict, she demands that Drogon fly her back, ignoring his injuries and demonstrating some significant entitlement.
At the very least, you could hunt us some supper.
She wanders into the wilderness and is captured by the Dothraki. After she's threatened multiple times and forced into their traditions, she makes the decision to kill all of the Khals. While this is a particularly brutal move, we can see her justification due to her agency being removed and the danger against her. And again, she's found the worship of the people through her having extraordinary abilities which contribute to her grandiosity, a very inflated self-image. Ser Jorah is then accepted back into Dany's favor, but he's infected with grayscale. Here we see her exhibit empathy. Dany shows an incredible ability to inspire loyalty, as she easily gains the favor of the Dothraki people. She returns to Meereen to find it under siege. Her response is extreme.
I will crucify the masters. I will set their fleets afire, kill every last one of their soldiers, and return their cities to the dirt.
She does not appear to be concerned with the complication of the innocents that would perish, despite her past mistake of crucifying masters indiscriminately. Tyrion cautions her about her father, echoing Ser Barristan. She maintains that this is different and is unreceptive. Her power is demonstrated, and she easily repels her enemies. After regaining control of Meereen, she's approached by the Ironborn to join her. This is important. Dany states that she wants to make the world better. She forbids the Ironborn to continue raiding and harming innocents, extending her purpose to her allies. As she prepares to cross the sea to Westeros, she cuts ties with her lover Daario. She reflects that she felt nothing doing this, demonstrating a lack of empathy.
The man I thought I cared for. And I felt nothing.
Tyrion reinforces that he believes in Daenerys, which continues to inflate her sense of self-importance.
I believe in you.
Approaching her perceived destiny and her self-perception. She finally arrives in Westeros and quickly becomes suspicious of Varys. A long history of mistrust grows stronger. She attempts to take steps to minimize her concerns of this mistrust by making a deal with him.
If you ever betray me, I'll burn you alive.
She continues to demonstrate entitlement when demanding Jon Snow's fealty with minimal knowledge of him or the North.
Tell Jon Snow that his queen invites him to come to Dragonstone and bend the knee.
However, she does maintain that she does not want to be Queen of the Ashes. She wants to be a quality ruler. She even resists advice to use fear to enhance her power, recognizing the costs.
Be a dragon.
Dany becomes angered when Jon Snow is not cooperative and makes valid points, a common response of entitlement.
He's refused to call me queen, he's refused to bow, and now he's calling me a child.
She is not truly interested in the content of their conversation, only that he owes her his allegiance. After speaking about all of her trauma, Dany references faith in herself as what allowed her to survive, which is more grandiosity.
The world hadn't seen a dragon in centuries until my children were born. The Dothraki hadn't crossed the sea. Any sea. They did for me. I was born to rule the Seven Kingdoms.
Dany eventually hears Jon's pleas for her help. She agrees to help him, but only if he bends the knee. This involves some amount of exploitation, given that this threat would also ultimately harm her. As events begin to occur not according to her plans, she's quick to descend into her mistrust and blames Tyrion, as well as make accusations to his motives.
If I have underestimated our enemies...
Our enemies? Your family, you mean? Perhaps you don't want to hurt them after all.
Jon reinforces that she cannot burn cities. She experiences vulnerability when Drogon is grounded during battle. This shakes her self-image of an unstoppable conqueror. Despite still winning the battle, it introduces doubt. As her conquest progresses, she maintains that she is not here to murder. However, she demands the loyalty of captives with a penalty of death, removing their freedom, contrary to her previous purpose, and using fear. When she's criticized and does not inspire loyalty, she kills the Tarlys against Tyrion's advice, also losing the support of some of her own followers, displaying callousness. Later, Dany speaks about her dragons as her children. She explains that strength is terrible. This is a viewpoint of utilitarianism. The ends justify the means, allowing her to make decisions to harm those who do not bend. In other words, she sees herself as justified through this lens. Tyrion points out her impulsivity as they discuss negotiating with enemies. She defends her decisions as necessary, and progresses to turn on Tyrion's motives when he makes a good point. This is narcissistic injury. Her self-image cannot tolerate this logic.
I'm trying to serve you by planning for the long term.
Perhaps if you planned for the short term, we wouldn't have lost Dawn and Highgarden.
She then buys into Jon Snow's purpose of fighting the undead, but at the cost of one of her dragons. In doing so, she gains Jon's loyalty. She is humble here, demonstrating that Jon can improve these traits.
I hope I deserve it.
After agreeing to take a huge risk and save the North, she receives a cold greeting, followed only by fear. This is a far cry from the devotion she inspired back in cities like Meereen. This lack of welcome extends to Sansa, adding more concerns for her inability to inspire loyalty. Her past decisions compound this, as she tells Sam about what she did to his family, giving Sam motive to push Jon against her. As she feels this isolation, her suspicion grows, which she shows against Tyrion.
Which makes you either a traitor or a fool.
I was a fool.
Not for the first time.
In a private conversation, Sansa asks for the North's independence. Daenerys is not receptive. She feels entitled to all kingdoms. Theon's return shows his intense loyalty to Sansa. As Dany looks on, she's reminded that she does not have this in Westeros. While she feels all of these realizations and her self-image is being affected, Jon becomes more distant, leaving her to feel even more isolated. The time then comes for Jon to inform her of his true lineage. Her reaction is denial. This is a massive blow to her entire self-image. She begs him not to tell anyone, as this is her entire purpose, and it is now at risk of being taken from her. Her entitlement remains prominent. There's no effort to truly share her power. She battles against the undead, and Jorah dies defending her. She has now lost her longest known friend. This is another huge progression into feeling more isolated. As a result of this isolation and lost allies, she makes moves to gain loyalty where she can. In one instance, she grants Gendry Storm's end and legitimizes him. Celebrations ensue after a difficult victory. She witnesses Jon receive extensive praise. This is contrary to her tendency for attention-seeking, as she sees where loyalties fall. She laments to Jon that she has no love in Westeros. She receives no positive attention or loyalty.
So many people have looked at me that way, but never here.
The time comes to attack King's Landing. Sansa makes a good point in suggesting that the men rest before the campaign. Daenerys responds with hostility, referencing her sacrifices.
Now that the time has come to reciprocate, you want to postpone.
This is fed by her entitlement. She is owed something, and she's not interested in accepting a delay to her gratification. She then makes a very important statement.
Men will live without fear and cruelty.
She has set a clear goal for this battle. While traveling with her dragons, Rhaegal is killed, another huge loss for Dany, plunging her into more hostility and feeling even more isolated. Varys confronts her as he disagrees with her decision on attacking the city. She responds with her destiny.
I'm here to free the world from tyrants. That is my destiny. And I will serve it no matter the cost.
She warps her logic to accept any cost. This is grandiosity. She completely fails to see that she would be acting as a tyrant. She comes to the point when Missandei is executed in front of Daenerys. Another one of her closest friends is now gone. She is almost completely isolated on an emotional level. As she turns away, we see immense rage. She is vengeful, hostile. Her ability to moderate her desires is depleted. Her suspicion continues to grow, particularly against Tyrion, but some of this suspiciousness is authentic, as she executes Varys for plotting against her. Dany laments that she has failed to earn the love of the people. She falls back on fear.
I don't have love here. I only have fear.
She then seeks Jon's love, a last desperate attempt for connection in a world in which she is more alone, and he pulls away. During discussions of attacking the people, she criticizes them for not overthrowing Cersei. The battle ensues. She is able to win decisively. The bells sound, signaling the city's surrender. Dany looks to the castle. Rage and hostility are plainly seen on her face. She proceeds to destroy King's Landing as others look on in horror. Interestingly, this decision might not have been made completely impulsively. Grey Worm claims she ordered him to execute all who follow Cersei. After her victory, she restates her purpose, as though it is a justification for her actions, feeding into Grandiosity. As she leans more heavily into this justification, she accuses Tyrion of treason. Her suspiciousness has not relented. Her actions have resulted in progressive loss of loyalty by those previously allied to her. Tyrion recounts her progression. How she has come to feel justified taking increasingly drastic and risky actions. He points out the role of the admiration, the positive attention given for her conquests and justice. Jon brings up the Unsullied's executions. Rather than defend the order, as she would in the past, she simply references necessity. He asks her to admit she made mistakes, but her grandiose self-image cannot admit to it.
Good world.
How'd you know? How'd you know it'll be good?
Because I know what is good.
This is Jon's final indication that she cannot change and will descend further. Personality traits. After considering her traumatic beginnings, her gain of immense power, multiple betrayals, and her ultimate demise, we can now evaluate her personality. In order to determine the personality traits for Daenerys Targaryen, I completed the personality inventory for the DSM-5. I answered the items through the lens of Daenerys and then tallied them up in accordance with the evidence from the show. Attention-seeking. Attention-seeking is defined as engaging in behavior designed to attract notice and to make oneself the focus of others' attention and admiration. When Daenerys finally came into her own after being forced into marriage, she progressively gained more favor from those who follow her. After her dragons, her greatest power comes from her followers. Her purpose was to give freedom to the oppressed. As such, she needed their positive attention, as it reinforced her purpose. Upon arriving to Winterfell, she's not given this attention, which progressively pushes her into hostility. She is not completely defined by attention-seeking, however. She does not seek it from those in power. We see this against the Khals, the Masters, and many nobles in Westeros. Rather, she only seeks it from those aligned with her perceived purpose. As a result, she scored in the moderate range for attention-seeking with a 2.1. Callousness. Callousness is defined by the lack of concern for the feelings or problems of others, a lack of guilt or remorse about the negative or harmful effects of one's actions on others. Callousness is a little trickier for her. She demonstrates a notable lack of reaction when witnessing her brother's death, but this is complicated by abuse and could be more dissociative. She certainly demonstrates strong empathy for those who are enslaved. However, this empathy remains specific to the oppressed. She's especially callous towards those she views in power. Her order of the execution of all masters, including ones she has not tried or even met, demonstrates that she has no concern. When she's eventually confronted with her actions, she does show some remorse, but this fades as she continues to act similarly. In a non-violent example, she ends her relationship with Daario and later comments that she felt nothing. This is someone with whom she had been very close for quite a long time. When her own loyal followers wrong her, she sentences them to death and does not display remorse. Her perception of justice is drastically stronger than her empathy. We see her callousness again when she executes the Tarleys for not becoming loyal. But it is when she burns King's Landing that her callousness is at its height. There are other personality factors at play in this decision, but she absolutely has no guilt or remorse about the vast harm that she unleashes, including so many innocents. Even after the act, she continues to be callous, justifying her actions and showing none of the empathy we had seen in the past.
It was necessary. I tried to make peace with Cersei.
Ultimately, she scored in the moderate range for callousness with a 2.1. This is a trait that began minimally and grew stronger over time. Grandiosity. Grandiosity is defined by believing that one is superior to others and deserves special treatment. Self-centeredness, feelings of entitlement, condescension towards others. Grandiosity is a trait easy to see in Daenerys. After all, she walked into flames and emerged with 3 dragons. Who wouldn't feel special after that? But in truth, it existed before. She's from a famous, powerful lineage, and was given much just based on her name. Her grandiosity first truly grew when she was Khaleesi. This is fed further when she receives adoration from the people on multiple occasions. The issue is that these lead to further entitlement and self-centered moments that eventually lead to her downfall. Her entitlement is obvious when she demands that Drogon find her food, despite being hurt after saving her.
At the very least, you could hunt us some supper.
When speaking to Jon Snow, we see that she has become fully engulfed in her grandiosity, as she's voicing how she is special.
The world hadn't seen a dragon in centuries until my children were born. The Dothraki hadn't crossed the sea. Any sea. They did for me. I was born to rule the 7 kingdoms. And I will.
She demands his loyalty, disregarding the hypocrisy of her dynasty and feeling she deserves special treatment. She becomes quickly angry when she's not given what she desires.
He's refused to call me queen, he's refused to bow, and now he's calling me a child.
Her inflated sense of self contributes to her justifications for terrible actions.
I'm here to free the world from tyrants. That is my destiny, and I will serve it no matter the cost.
As she begins to lose the approval of the people and her allies, she leans more heavily into grandiosity. As her self-image is threatened, she naturally seeks to justify her decisions and cannot admit fault.
How do you know it'll be good?
Because I know what is good.
Nor can she compromise her power. Overall, this is her strongest trait. She received the maximum score of 3. Hostility. Hostility is defined by persistent or frequent angry feelings, anger or irritability in response to minor slights and insults, mean, nasty, or vengeful behavior. Dany can certainly be considered a hostile person. She has racked up a significant body count throughout her life, from the slavers to Dothraki calls to prisoners and even her own followers when she was wronged. She has a tendency to react with anger frequently. At times, this makes sense, such as when her dragons were stolen in Karth.
Many times in my life,
I don't care where you've been.
However, we also see anger with those close to her, when her advisors question her negotiations, or when Tyrion's plans are not successful.
We have a plan. It's still the right plan.
The right plan. Your strategy has lost us Dawn, the Iron Islands, and the Reach.
Her hostility also increases when people do not do what she wishes, or she feels that she's not taken seriously, such as Karth, when Sansa asks for a delayed attack, or Jon Snow not pledging loyalty. One of her most famous statements even includes,
"They can live in my new world, or they can die in their old one,"
which is quite a hostile worldview. But it is her vengeful behavior that really took her to the point of what some call madness. When betrayed by the witch, she burns her alive. She has an extremely strong response to seeing crucified slaves, responding in an equally brutal manner. In the end, Missandei is executed in front of her. We see pure rage on her face. She has a similar expression in the moment of the bells. She knows the city has surrendered, But it is not enough. She wants to literally destroy Cersei, and she makes a grave decision. Dany becomes increasingly hostile as time goes on. In the beginning, she was able to temper her more drastic hostile reactions. This was because she was surrounded by multiple people with valuable experience and good advice. She's even able to ignore the more aggressive proposals from Dario. As she continues to lose those close to her, she gradually loses this moderation. She eventually feels she has nothing left and allows her hostility to dictate her perceptions of justice. Overall, she scored in the moderate range with a 2.3, primarily because of her temperance earlier in her timeline. This is a trait that grew stronger over time. Impulsivity. Impulsivity is defined by acting on the spur of the moment in response to immediate stimuli, acting on a momentary basis without a plan or consideration of outcomes, difficulty establishing and following plans, a sense of urgency and self-harming behavior under emotional distress. Impulsivity is a trait that many believe dictated her behavior. However, there are few instances of her reacting with absolutely no plan. There are many instances that appear impulsive, such as offering her dragons in a trade, ordering executions, or burning King's Landing. If we evaluate the definitions, many of these are hostile traits, as she's considered the outcome in advance. Even in the case of King's Landing, there's evidence that she made the decision with forethought. She does not mention impulse to Jon Snow, and Grey Worm references previously administered orders.
Kill all who follow Cersei Lannister.
Tyrion considered her impulsive, but I posit that he has mistaken her decisions for other traits. To be clear, she's not completely free from impulsive action, but she did not score in the clinical range at a 1.5. Risk-taking. Risk-taking is defined by engagement in dangerous, risky, and potentially self-damaging activities, unnecessarily and without regard to consequences, a lack of concern for one's own limitations and denial of the reality of personal danger, reckless pursuit of goals regardless of the level of risk involved. As she slowly comes into her own power as Khaleesi, she begins to issue commands she knows are against Dothraki traditions, which will cause dissent. Early in her timeline, risk played an important role in Dany's success. Her decision to walk into a fire gave her immense power. Her decision to join the North's battle against the undead was also an enormous risk. There is a strong argument that this was necessary, but the approach she took was dangerous, such as when she found herself alone and surrounded due to her own aggression. This was especially risky after she had already lost a dragon during her previous rescue effort. She voices her desire multiple times to ride her dragon alone to solve tactical issues, only to be talked down by her advisors.
Enough with the clever plans. I have 3 large dragons. I'm going to fly them to the Red Keep. What kind of a queen am I if I'm not willing to risk my life to fight them?
A smart one.
In her final assault on King's Landing, she takes a huge political risk, destroying the city, knowing that this would turn many against her. Obviously, she ignored the consequences and reality of personal danger. This plays a role in her death. Dany scored in the high range for risk-taking with a 2.6, as many of the risks she took could have directly resulted in her death. Suspiciousness. Suspiciousness is defined by expectations of and sensitivity to the signs of interpersonal ill intent or harm, doubts about loyalty and fidelity of others, feelings of being mistreated, used, and or persecuted. Suspicion is something that makes a lot of sense given her position of power and the threat she poses to her enemies. There are obvious events when strangers she encounters turn out to be a significant threat, such as a common merchant or a little girl. There's the witch, who she trusts to treat Drogo only to result in his death. She is schemed against in Karth, where her dragons are eventually stolen. Then there are those close to her. First, it's her friend Ser Jorah. She ultimately forgives him, but only after several grand gestures. She's later betrayed by Varys, Tyrion, and Jon Snow. Most people in power will demonstrate the trait of suspiciousness, as they will have several enemies and their power will be envied. Dany does have some that, despite her experiences of betrayal, she appears to fully trust. These include people like Sir Barristan, Grey Worm, and Missandei. Although suspicion is frequently on her mind, she has secure attachment with some long-standing relationships. She generally does not act on her suspicion until evidence confirms it, meaning she does not demonstrate this trait to the point of paranoia. Overall, she scored in the moderate range with a 2.4. And now we come to the diagnosis. Now that we've examined her personality traits, we can identify these patterns and symptoms to find the most accurate diagnosis. The majority of her traits fall in the antagonism category, meaning she frequently finds herself at odds with others. When examining the alternative model for narcissistic personality disorder, she meets both of the essential traits of grandiosity and attention-seeking. For the criteria for this diagnosis, she certainly has a grandiose sense of self-importance. Her entire existence revolves around her success and power. She definitely believes that she's special, if not the most special. She requires excessive admiration, which is a major contributor to her decision to burn King's Landing when it's lost. She's certainly entitled. There is not a ton of evidence of her exploiting others beyond simply threatening them. She's shown empathy, but many other times is callous. Note that narcissistic personality disorder has the capacity to show empathy, unlike some who are antisocial. There is insufficient evidence of enduring envy. She is certainly arrogant, especially as she cements her power. In total, she meets criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. For other diagnoses, such as antisocial personality disorder, she meets only the traits of callousness, hostility, and risk-taking, which is below the minimum of 6 required traits. For post-traumatic stress disorder, she certainly experienced trauma and had distressing dreams and dissociation when she was younger. However, these symptoms do not continue to manifest after she gains social support. It is possible that she met this diagnosis at the beginning of her journey, but PTSD can remit as one builds resilience, receives treatment, or finds purpose. In conclusion, by the common definition of madness, she meets the portion of a state of severe mental illness, behavior, or thinking that is very foolish or dangerous, intense anger, or rage. Daenerys Targaryen's descent into madness makes sense. Individuals with narcissistic personality disorder have been consistently shown to demonstrate both aggression and violence. Studies have supported that they engage in both proactive aggression, which is goal-directed, and reactive aggression, which is a response to provocation. In Dany's case, she experienced severe insults to her self-image in that she did not have the support of the people, and she was provoked further by Cersei. It would therefore make sense that she would make this decision, something that had already been brewing. For someone with narcissistic personality disorder, this is more than enough to push them over the edge, to make an emotional, irrational, mad decision. It would not be uncommon for a person with this profile to make such a sudden decision with these contributing factors.